Okay, welcome. Thank you very much for inviting me again, and thank you for all those nice kind words, that most of which aren't really true, all the kind bits anyway. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I'm not really going to tell you a whole bunch of new things. There are some interesting factoids that came out of my study, which I'll cover. But what I try to do, and what I try to bring to this horseshoeing party, is to try and connect practical horseshoeing with what is current scientific advance of knowledge and understanding. The most important thing that I can tell you is that horseshoeing as an art has stood the test of time, and there is nothing new that you can think of in this trade. It's all been done before. What's coming along is a far greater understanding of the mechanisms involved and the way in which some of those mechanisms break down. And that's what we'll try and go through as we go through the presentation. I immediately apologize for my lack of political correctness. I'm unfortunately renowned for it, and I don't need to call the French, but stop you, put your earplugs in. I believe a spade is a shovel, and horseshoeing is about that. You know, we have to make instantaneous decisions based on facts that are in front of us, and not things that we can sit there and surmise for 3 or 4 hours with long fancy words. Which brings me to roles and responsibilities as far as anatomy is concerned. We all know that horseshoeing is a practical job, but unfortunately, in order to be able to do it well, you need a certain level of knowledge and understanding of anatomy and physiology. I don't believe that you need to remember long fancy Latin words down to a cellular level to practice your art, but you do need to understand and have a comprehensive understanding of functional anatomy. What things do, where they are located, and more importantly, what they interact with. Because as you'll see as we go through the presentation, this horse is an integrated mechanical and anatomical system. Every component of it is dependent on the smooth operation of the rest of it. So, let's see what we can do here. Oh, it doesn't work, but the clock does. Okay. Alright, so, a little bit about Oz and me in particular. I am with my partner over there, Caldwell, who you'll meet presently as we go up and down the stage. Okay, we run an organisation called the Shoeing Lab. It is ostensibly a retail outlet, but its raison d'etre is about finding solutions, farriery-based solutions, to make farriers' lives and work easier. It also funds independent research, which we do in relationship to foot dynamics, and we spend a lot of time trying to further the education of farriers through lectures, demonstrations, and hands-on clinics that we try to make as a kind of practical teaching tool for the anatomy and physiology. We have a lot to do with competitions. We run a big international therapeutic shoemaking and shoeing competition at the Game Fair in England, which is a huge, great big trade sporting event, which you're all welcome to in July. And as you know, we're also into research. Our research is foot-based and shoeing-based rather than cellular level chemistry. It's about practical application. And one thing that I want to say about research is that the very nature of it, you are going you are progressing on the shoulders of the people that were there in front of you. Research is a methodical tool that takes one question at a time and adds to the puzzle. Most people, when they think about it, they want an answer to how this shoe affects so-and-so, or such and such, or what would happen if it was in this type of horse or that type of horse. Science and research can't do that. It can only do it piece by piece. Is there a difference between the treatments? Then the next question is, what is that difference? Then the next question is, why is that difference? Would that difference then be the same on this other breed? So on and so forth. So it's a long, slow, laborious process. And there are lots of people, before you read the exciting paper that excites you, there's lots of information that went into building the question for the latest paper. And that's the same in my case. So we're going to have a little look at what I did. And I basically set out to investigate the relationship between poor foot shape or hoof morphology and the incidence of specific pathologies or diseases. Common ones, navicular, tendon lesions, DJD, etc. As a farrier, I felt that from the background of knowledge that and understanding that we had about foot balance, that if that was correct, then deviations from that should be able to give us an indication that some of these horses might progress on and develop a specific disease. And that because we're there every 4, 6, 8 weeks, and we witness the changes that go on in these feet over time, that we could possibly predict the onset of some of these pathologies, and then perhaps instigate preventative treatment programs to try and avoid those situations. So that was the essence of my investigation. The first part of that, though, unfortunately, was trying to determine whether the models that we work on for foot balance were actually applicable. You all know that there are lots of theories about foot balance, lots of, dare I say, cultish followings for this method, that method, or the other method. And when you actually sit and look at them, they're not hugely different, and they all disseminate from information that came from the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. But they've become rigid rules. So I had to try and find a method of investigating to validate any of those methods. So I took a number of points from Duckett's theory, from the natural balance theories, from Strasser's, and I set out to measure those points to see if I could find them consistently. Now, if you look at most scientific reviews of foot balance, they take measurements that are based on lengths, angles, etc. Lengths and angles will give you an average, but they don't account for variations in size, breed, and environment. So I looked at trying to find a method of finding specific points along the foot that were based on proportional values. So that whatever method I was using related to any size, from pony to draft horse. So what I did was develop this mapping system that was built around specific, if I can get it there, anatomical points. So I use as my baseline the origin of the heel horn, which lined up with the position where the heel and the bar lamellae turn on each other, projected those forward to where they intersected the white line. And the white line was important because it originates from the distal tip of P3. And then I bisected that diagonally and expected to find the center of rotation of the coffin joint. And I used that as a landmark because all of the movement within that foot and the changes in direction of load and pressure come from that point. So from there, what we then did was to try take those measurements on a series of cadavers, pre-trim and post-trim, so that we could validate the measurement process. But to be able to do that, we had to come up with a method of designing a repeatable trimming protocol. Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that this is the only way to trim horses. That's not what I'm doing. This method is about being able to have a repeatable process from which you can gauge the results of other interventions. So if you like, it's ground zero. You don't know whether it's right or whether it's wrong, but you know where you are. So in doing that, sorry, wrong way around, what we did was design a trimming protocol that was based on identifying the widest, highest point of the frog, the live sole, similar to the way that the natural balance people do it, and we trimmed the wall then to a horizontal plane with the sole. So the wall was trimmed down to the solar level, flat, live sole wasn't invaded, and then the wall was reduced in thickness so that it was the same thickness from quarter to quarter. So the heels were reduced to the widest, highest point of the frog, wall reduced to the height of the sole, wall reduced in thickness so it was the same thickness from quarter to quarter. We then took a series of measurements, the usual lot, dorsal hoof wall length and angle, heel length and angle, and then from here we took a range of proportional measurements to different anatomical points. So we take it from the heel to the center of our map, and then from the heel to what Duckett described as his dot, 3/8 of an inch back from the point of frog. From there to the point of breakover, our intersection of the white line here, and then we divided those by the entire sagittal axis from the end of the heel ball to the toe. Does everybody understand that? Yeah? So to get our proportions, we used the solar length from toe to the end of the heel ball as the measure, and then we measured it as proportions all the way along there, and then the toe and the heel lengths we also used as proportions of the solar length to give us this kind of 3D impression of the various sizes of the feet. We then radiographed these feet with lateral radiographs with a dorsal wall marker and a drawing pin, 3/8 of an inch back from the true point frog, marked out the positions on the map, and tried to validate Duckett's dot, Duckett's bridge, and the center of rotation from those measurements. I have to say that whilst statistically the measurements do not validate Duckett's theories, he was not far away. And when you consider that those experiments were done in 1989, without the use of fancy modern technology. From a guide, for a guide in horseshoeing, he wasn't far off. But nonetheless, what we found was that we could consistently, irrespective of shape or size, find the center of rotation of the coffin joint from an external landmark. That point that we had from where our grid intersected up to the center of rotation, we could find that consistently. On 972 cadavers, we found that within 2 millimeters, 87.4% of the time. 2 millimeters on an average thoroughbred foot is nothing. Duckett's dot, however, was inconsistent from both ends of the scale, and it ranged from 2 millimeters plus to 11 millimeters minus. And that's because of the orientation of P3 within the hoop capsule, what we now call euphemistically Palmer angle. It changes the position of the extensor process, but it doesn't change the position of the center of rotation of P2. And the reason for that is that the tendons go into tension and pick it forward. I'll describe later a paper by Molman and Van Heel, which shows that the horse has got about a 4% range in which it can adapt its posture without it excessively loading any of the structures and still function relatively normal. Beyond that, those structures start to lose their elastic properties and start to break down, and that's when we start to see lamenesses. So, the interesting thing about it was, though, that all of the, these are the measurements that we took, all of the variations in the pre-trip and the post-trip were here in this solar arch. Many of you will have heard Max Evaldi going on about how solar arch dictates the shape of the feet and how that is indicative of pathologies. Our numbers suggest that the changes that occur in the feet, the detrimental changes that occur between this center of rotation and what's called the center of pressure. For argument's sake, we'll call it Duckett's dot for easy reckoning, but that distance is crucial to foot shape, foot distortion, and the onset of pathologies. Because it's the solar arch that's changing its form, losing its shape. And that's where both the extensor and the flexor tendons are attached. So if you think of that distance there as the kind of band of extensor and flexor neutrality, anything that overloads one side is going to distort it and flatten it out. Anything that overloads the other side is going to do the same thing. So then we went on to look at, was there any difference in these proportions between front and hind feet? Who thinks that there's a big difference between front and hind feet?
You mean in the location of Duckett's dot and so forth?
As proportional values, yeah, I know that they're a different shape,
Right.
but proportional values. In other words, the mechanics of the foot. No, there isn't. Next to nothing at all. And you can see here on this graph, the dark ones are the hind feet, light ones are the front feet. Okay, and they're all within non-discernible differences. The only difference is that cop difference. Again, because the sole is more vaulted, it is slightly different in terms of its proportion, that core to cop distance. Then we thought, well, this is still not going to validate this foot balance and this trimming methodism without us looking at the ferrule holes. So kindly, Chris Pollitt and Brian Hampson sent us their data from their Bromby studies, and we converted their measurements to our measurement protocol using proportions rather than linear lengths. Guess what? There was no difference between UK domesticated horses in various management regimes and the feral regimes, except for one environmental area, the high plain desert, where the feet were excessively worn. The rest of them were exactly the same in terms of proportional values, and consistent in that value. So then what decided to think, well, hang on a minute, we're all concentrating on foot shape. Beauty is, aesthetic beauty is what's desirable, when in real life we know that aesthetic beauty doesn't give you all of the functional aspects of life that you think. My father once said to me, if you really want a nice home life with a clean shirt and a good meal, don't go chasing that pretty one down there. This one over here is the one that's going to make you happy for 40 years. This one over here is going to give you a heartache. So, but interestingly enough, the variations that were within these groups, there were 5 different environmental areas, plus 2 lots of domesticated horses from different areas. The variance between them was this 3 or 4% difference in the core-cop relationship. So the feral horses had a slightly more upright solar arch, but the rest of it was just as ugly as ours. And the domesticated horses, which were in restricted turnout and had previously been shod and in wet weather environments, had slightly flatter solar arch, but the rest of the proportions were the same. So that kind of started to think, well, maybe this wild horse model is a crock of shit. Maybe we're not quite as dumb as everybody tells us we are. Maybe we just don't understand it. So a picture was starting to emerge, and well, I've kind of dealt with that, but again, the key number there is this cop distance here, the distance from the heel bolt to the cop. That's the only one that was significantly different. So then what we decided to look at is, okay, so we think that the wild horse model's a crock of shit. The barefoot model looks to be a crock of shit. Let's see if it's shoeing that does the damage. So we